In this video, we're diving into one of the most dramatic and inspiring stories in the Bible, the complete story of Queen Esther. But before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because you won't want to miss our upcoming series on biblical heroes. Ahasuerus reigned over 127 provinces from India to Ethiopia. In the third year of his reign, he made a feast for all his princes and servants. For 180 days he displayed the riches of his glorious kingdom in the honor of his excellent majesty. When these days ended, the king made a feast for all the people present in Shushan the palace, both great and small, for 7 days. On the seventh day, when the king's heart was merry with wine, he commanded the 7 chamberlains to bring Queen Vashti before the king with the royal crown, to show the people and princes her beauty. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command. The king was very angry, and his anger burned within him. The king's wise men told him that Queen Vashti had not done well, and that her deed would become known to all women, causing them to despise their husbands. So they advised that Vashti should no longer come before King Ahasuerus, and that the king should give her royal position to another who was better than she. In Shushan, the palace, there lived a Jewish man named Mordecai, who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives. He brought up Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was fair and beautiful, and when her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. When the king's command was published that fair young virgins should be sought for the king, Esther was also brought to the king's house, to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the women. The young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor. Esther had not revealed her people or her family, for Mordecai had instructed her not to reveal it. When Esther's turn came to go to the king, she asked for nothing except what Hegai appointed. Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who looked upon her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal house. The king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. He set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. While Mordecai sat at the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, were angry and sought to harm King Ahasuerus. The matter became known to Mordecai, who told it to Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. When investigation was made of the matter, it was found to be true. Both men were hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him, setting his seat above all the princes who were with him. All the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed and showed reverence to Haman, but Mordecai did not bow or show him reverence. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or show him reverence, Haman was filled with wrath. He thought it beneath him to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of Mordecai's people. So Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai. In the first month they cast pur, that is, the lot, before Haman from day to day, and from month to the 12th month, which is the month Adar. Haman said to King Ahasuerus that there was a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of the kingdom. Their laws were different from all people, and they did not keep the king's laws. Therefore it was not profitable for the king to tolerate them. Haman said, "If it pleases the king, let it be written that they may be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to those who have charge of the business." The king took his ring from his hand and gave it to Haman. The king said to Haman, "The silver is given to you, the people also, to do with them as seems good to you." The king's scribes were called, and there was written according to all that Haman had commanded to the king's lieutenants and to the governors who were over every province. The decree stated that on one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month Adar, all Jews, both young and old, little children and women, should be killed and destroyed, and their goods taken. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes. He went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry. In every province, wherever the king's command and decree came, there was great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Esther's maids and chamberlains came and told her. The queen was exceedingly grieved. She sent clothing to Mordecai to replace his sackcloth, but he would not accept it. Then Esther called for Hatak, one of the king's chamberlains, and gave him a command to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was happening. Hatak went to Mordecai in the street of the city. Mordecai told him of all that had happened to him and of the sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the Jews, to destroy them. He also gave him the copy of the written decree and instructed him that he should go to the king to make supplication and request before him for her people. Hatak came and told Esther the words of Mordecai. Again Esther spoke to Hatak and gave him a message for Mordecai, saying that all the king's servants knew that whoever, whether man or woman, should come to the king into the inner court without being called, there was one law to put him to death, except those to whom the king should hold out the golden scepter that he might live. But she had not been called to come to the king for 30 days. Then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, "Do not think that you will escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will be destroyed. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Then Esther told them to return this answer to Mordecai. "Go, gather together all the Jews who are present in Shushan and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my maids will fast likewise. And so I will go to the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish." On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's house. When the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight, and the king held out to Esther the golden scepter that was in his hand. So Esther drew near and touched the top of the scepter. Then the king said to her, "What do you wish, Queen Esther?" "What is your request?" "It shall be given to you, up to half the kingdom." Esther answered, "If it seems good to the king, let the king and Haman come today to the banquet that I have prepared for him." So the king and Haman came to the banquet that Esther had prepared. The king said to Esther at the banquet of wine, "What is your petition? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it shall be performed." Then Esther answered, "My petition and my request is this. If I have found favor in the sight of the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my petition and perform my request, let the king and Haman come to the banquet that I shall prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said." Then Haman went out that day joyful and with a glad heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai at the king's gate, that he did not stand up or move for him, he was full of indignation against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself. When he came home, he sent and called for his friends and Zeresh, his wife. Haman told them of the glory of his riches, the multitude of his children, and all the things in which the king had promoted him. Haman said, "Yet all this means nothing to me, so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting at the king's gate." Then Zeresh's wife and all his friends said to him, "Let a gallows be made 50 cubits high, and tomorrow speak to the king that Mordecai may be hanged on it. Then go merrily with the king to the banquet." The thing pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made. That night the king could not sleep, and he commanded to bring the book of records of the Chronicles, and they were read before the king. It was found written that Mordecai had told of Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's chamberlains, the keepers of the door, who had sought to harm King Ahasuerus. The king said, "What honor and dignity has been done to Mordecai for this?" Then the king's servants who ministered to him said, "Nothing has been done for him." The king said, "Who is in the court?" Haman had come into the outer court of the king's house to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows that he had prepared for him. The king's servants said to him, "Behold, Haman stands in the court." The king said, "Let him come in." So Haman came in. The king said to him, "What shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor?" Haman thought in his heart, "To whom would the king delight to do honor more than to myself?" Haman answered the king, "For the man whom the king delights to honor, let the royal apparel be brought which the king uses to wear, and the horse that the king rides upon, and the crown royal which is set upon his head. Let this apparel and horse be delivered to the hand of one of the king's most noble princes, that they may array the man whom the king delights to honor, and bring him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaim before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Then the king said to Haman, Make haste and take the apparel and the horse, as you have said, and do even so to Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Let nothing fail of all that you have spoken. Then Haman took the apparel and the horse, and arrayed Mordecai, and brought him on horseback through the street of the city, and proclaimed before him, Thus shall it be done to the man whom the king delights to honor. Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hurried to his house mourning, with his head covered. Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Then his wise men and Zeresh his wife said to him, If Mordecai is of the seed of the Jews, before whom you have begun to fall, you shall not prevail against him, but shall surely fall before him. So the king and Haman came to banquet with Queen Esther. The king said again to Esther on the second day at the banquet of wine, What is your petition, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. What is your request? It shall be performed, even up to half the kingdom. Then Queen Esther answered and said, If I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me at my petition, and my people at my request. For we are sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be slain, and to perish. Then King Ahasuerus answered and said to Queen Esther, Who is he, and where is he, who dares presume in his heart to do so? Esther said, The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman. Then Haman was afraid before the king and the queen. The king arose from the banquet of wine in his wrath and went into the palace garden. Haman stood up to make request for his life to Queen Esther, for he saw that there was evil determined against him by the king. Then the king returned out of the palace garden into the place of the banquet of wine, and Haman had fallen upon the bed where Esther was. Then the king said, Will he also assault the queen before me in the house? Harbona, one of the chamberlains, said before the king, Look, the gallows 50 cubits high, which Haman made for Mordecai, who spoke good for the king, stands in the house of Haman. Then the king said, Hang him on it. So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. On that day King Ahasuerus gave the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, to Queen Esther. Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was to her. The king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. Esther spoke yet again before the king, and fell down at his feet, and begged him with tears to put away the mischief of Haman the Agagite, and his device that he had devised against the Jews. Then the king held out the golden scepter toward Esther. So Esther arose and stood before the king. She said, If it pleases the king, and if I have favor in his sight, and the thing seems right before the king, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be, written to reverse the letters devised by Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Jews who are in all the king's provinces. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, Write also for the Jews as it pleases you in the king's name, and seal it with the king's ring. For the writing which is written in the king's name, and sealed with the king's ring, may no man reverse. Then the king's scribes were called, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Jews, and to the lieutenants, deputies, and rulers of the provinces, which are from India to Ethiopia. The letters were sent by posts on horseback, and riders on mules, camels, and young dromedaries, that the Jews should be ready against that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. In the 12th month, that is, the month Adar, on the 13th day of the same, when the king's command and his decree drew near to be put in execution, on the day that the enemies of the Jews hoped to have power over them, it was turned to the contrary, that the Jews had rule over them that hated them. The Jews gathered themselves together in their cities throughout all the provinces of King Ahasuerus to lay hand on such as sought their hurt. No man could withstand them, for the fear of them fell upon all people. All the rulers of the provinces, the lieutenants, the deputies, and officers of the king helped the Jews because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. Thus the Jews defeated all their enemies with the sword and slaughter and destruction, and did what they would to those who hated them. In Shushan, the palace, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. The 10 sons of Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, they killed, but on the spoil they did not lay their hand. On that day the number of those who were slain in Shushan, The palace was brought before the king. The Jews who were in Shushan gathered themselves together on the 14th day, also of the month Adar, and killed 300 men at Shushan. But on the prey they did not lay their hand. But the other Jews who were in the king's provinces gathered themselves together and stood for their lives, and had rest from their enemies, and killed 75,000 of their foes. But they did not lay their hands on the prey on the 13th day of the month Adar. On the 14th day of the same they rested and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Mordecai wrote these things and sent letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, to establish this among them, that they should keep the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same, yearly as the days on which the Jews rested from their enemies, and the month which was turned to them from sorrow to joy, and from mourning into a good day. They should make them days of feasting and joy, and of sending portions to one another, and gifts to the poor. So they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. Therefore, for all the words of this letter, and of that which they had seen concerning this matter, and which had come to them, the Jews ordained, and took upon them, and upon their descendants, and upon all such as joined themselves to them, so as it should not fail, that they would keep these 2 days according to their writing, and according to their appointed time every year. King Ahasuerus laid a tribute upon the land, and upon the isles of the sea, all the acts of his power and of his might, and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai, to which the king advanced him. Are they not written in the book of the chronicles of the kings of Media and Persia? For Mordecai, the Jew, was next to King Ahasuerus, and great among the Jews, and accepted by the multitude of his brethren, seeking the wealth of his people, and speaking peace to all his descendants. If this story encouraged you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. What lesson from Esther's story resonates most with you? And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Scripture, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. We've got more incredible biblical stories coming your way.